Hi, I am so glad that you are here. If you're new here, my name is Sabrina, and this is Stylish and Sustainable. I started Stylish and Sustainable to help empower and educate women on how to live more sustainably, while also recognizing that we gotta find a way to do it that is realistic, right? And in some ways that is stylish, is modern, and redefines the way that we live as women in the modern world. Today I'm going to be answering one of the most common questions that I get from gals when they're about to start their sustainable life journeys, and that is, where do I start? So without any further ado, let's dive in. Today, I'm going to be just chatting at you for a brief period, and I'm going to be answering a question that I get from a lot of people. When people start to think about the impact that their lives have on the environment and the people around them and their own bodies, the most common question that I get is, where do I start? Sometimes it can feel just so overwhelming when we begin to want to do things and to take action, and then realize that the changes that have to take place are kind of big, and they're kind of big lifestyle shifts. But I think that if you take them in small bites, they're very, very easy to digest, just like just about anything else. I think the easiest place to start is to start with changes that are easy to justify. So a couple weeks ago, we talked about finding our environmental why. So essentially just defining why we care. And if the reason that we care about each change is really powerful and really robust, then in the moments when it's challenging, you can have a good reason to keep going. And I think for most people, the changes that are equally as important for your body and the health of your body as they are for the health of the earth are the easiest ones to conceptualize. And I think they also have the strongest whys, because they're easy to defend when it comes to the investment of a little extra money and a little extra time, which any life change is going to take a little extra money and a little extra time. But the benefits for these changes, like I said, are twofold. They're very, very, very good for your body, and they are super important if we are going to change the trajectory that we are on in our time here as people on Earth. Like I said, there is a 5-step process, I think, that can really help get the ball rolling and get you moving towards a more sustainable lifestyle. And they're not huge things. I'm not going to tell you in this episode, oh man, yeah, first thing, go vegan. Second thing, sell your car and walk everywhere. And then also finally, don't buy clothes. And if you do, only buy organic. That's totally not what I'm going to tell you. These are things that, for me, when I first started living more sustainably, I was able to do. And while eating organic, which is going to be one of them, is something I've done for a long time that my parents kind of introduced at a very basic level, it was something that was very possible for Cooper, my fiance, and I to transition, and even living out in St. Paul, which is a very, very different social climate, and a lot of the more progressive environmental movements have not reached out there. But these ones you can do anywhere in the country, and I promise you that. You can hopefully do anywhere in the Western world. So the first step is, like I mentioned, buying organic. A lot of people, when they hear the word organic, immediately they start seeing dollar signs. And I know that it can be a little bit hard to swallow, especially certain fruits and vegetables that are substantially more expensive than conventionally farmed things. So first of all, let's talk about what organic is. An organic certification essentially means that, along with the other requirements that follow a organic certification, like protecting soil health and so on and so forth, that the farmer who is selling and growing the produce that you're buying is not spraying your foods with pesticides. And especially that they are not spraying your food with pesticides that are known carcinogenics or endocrine disruptors, or lymphatic system disruptors, which most pesticides are one or all three of those things. So while there is some argument about whether the USDA organic certification is stringent enough, and I totally encourage you to do some research on that argument and learn about what people are saying, organic farming is always much better for the environment and for our bodies than conventional farming. Pesticides and fertilizers really are a bane to everyone's existence. They run off fields and cause what is called eutrophication. So I'm going to put on my environmentalist and my ecology hat and explain eutrophication very simply. So eutrophication is essentially when just insane algae blooms pop up in areas where a lot of fertilizer has run downstream. And what happens is this algae and the different types of bacteria that's growing, especially because fertilizers are nitrogen rich, and so they help things to grow, but also they offset the balance, is that these algae blooms leach all of the oxygen and the nutrients out of the water that fish and other marine life or other river life need to live, obviously. And this, in turn, can lead to what is called dead zones. So these are just like exactly what they sound like. They are zones of death. They're zones where nothing exists. And that's super creepy and weird because, especially in marine ecosystems, they are always thriving. But in places where all of the oxygen gets sucked out of the water, there is nothing left for these things to live on. And so essentially the entire ecosystem collapses. That is just the basis of why fertilizers and pesticides are bad. There's so many other reasons, especially when we're talking about its effect on local ecosystems and the environment, and especially when we look at how they get into water systems and how they are contaminating marine life, which down the road we in turn eat. And we can talk for hours about how pesticides and toxins compound up the food chain, but let's just suffice to say that pesticides are not good and fertilizers are not good, especially for the environment. When it comes to your body, it's kind of like a duh. Like I said, a lot of them are known carcinogenics and endocrine disruptors. They can cause fertility loss, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to sound like a pharmaceutical commercial. Pesticides blow. Let's just say that. And I think that it's really a question of where do we want to invest our money? When you buy organic, you're investing your money in what I like to say is maintaining health. So you're making sure that what you put in your body is good for your body. Whereas when you save the extra 50 cents in an extreme situation, or 25, which is more often common, or if you're buying at a local farmer's market, it can definitely be up to $1 to $2 or, a 25% increase in the cost for organic versus conventional. What you're saying is that you would rather pay later on down the line when you develop cancer, or you develop Alzheimer's, or you develop blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of science coming out about how these artificial and synthetic chemicals affect the health of our bodies. And if we're eating food every day, which we do, and as I mentioned, pesticides and chemicals compound up the food system, we can actually be ingesting a large quantity of pesticides and fertilizers over the course of our life. And it's just nasty-ish. It's bad stuff. So we want to buy organic. Now, like I said, we have to ease ourselves into this. So next week I'm going to talk about the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, but let's just suffice to say that at least starting out with buying 50% of your produce organic is the best way to go. And try and follow the rule where if you can pick it up and take a bite into it without removing a skin, you should be buying organic, because that means that what you're biting is exactly what was being sprayed. If, on the other hand, it's like an avocado or a banana or something like that, and you've got to peel the skin back, then you're less likely, and we'll talk about the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen next week, to be ingesting the pesticides. So, number one, buy organic. That was long-winded. Sorry, guys, but it's an important one. And then the second one is buying antibiotic-free meats. So antibiotics are a tricky thing, and I'm going to be careful about what I say because I know that a lot of people feel very strongly either way about antibiotics in our pharmaceutical world. But that's not what today's episode is about. They can help us get through some really nasty-ish as people, but they essentially allow massive cattle and chicken and pork factories to just shove hundreds of animals in a very small space and not have them all die, which without antibiotics, they would, for numerous reasons. So these reasons are pretty easy to understand when you start thinking about the situation. If you put a ton of animals in this really small space and they're being fed food that they really just can't even ingest, which sometimes actually includes byproducts and meat from their own kind, and they're in a situation where it's really, really unsanitary, if they don't have antibiotics, they will essentially just die from the diseases that they contract because they're around so many other animals in such a small space, and the sanitation is really poor, like I said. Just imagine if you did that to humans, if you put them all in a mud pit in like a 4x4 room and you tried to squeeze like 5 people in that tiny space and you never let them leave or see sunshine, they would definitely get sick. And in order to keep those people alive, you would have to give them antibiotics and different pharmaceuticals so that they didn't die. And especially for these cattle factories or chicken factories or whatever meat, it's important that these animals stay alive because they're capital. It's not for their own life, obviously, because they're treated insanely inhumanely. And I'm gonna tone my animal activist down a little bit here, but it's just a bad sitch, guys. It's not a good situation, and we don't want to support it. First of all, because it's inhumane, but also secondly, because, like I said, the antibiotics can accumulate in the food that you're eating, and we don't want to eat that stuff, especially because it's pretty hardcore medicine, and especially if your body doesn't need it at this time, you really shouldn't be ingesting that. Not only that, but it also essentially hampers our ability to fight diseases and infections in the future because we're always kind of on like a very, very low level of antibiotic because we're ingesting it in the meat. So that is the health reason not to do it. The environmental reason not to do it is because these factories and these big, huge, we'll call them factory farms, often accumulate just like insane amounts of waste. But the problem is that this waste, if they're being fed antibiotics, is toxic because it's unusable to crops as a fertilizer, obviously because it has the antibiotics, and they give the animals lots of other nasty stuff. So it's just really, really, really nasty poo. Yeah, we're going to talk about poo, guys. I didn't know how to get around it. We're definitely going to talk about poo. And we'll put a pin in that and just say poo is really, really good. And that's such a weird statement. I never thought that would come out of my mouth. But poop has insane nutrients in it. Fecal matter from animals in a closed loop system is really essential to providing nutrients to plants and to building good soil health. But when the animals eat really sketchy stuff, then their poop is not good anymore. So that's essentially the situation, except for it's hardcore. And the toxic waste that these factory farms accumulate leaches into nearby waterways in the same way that pesticides and fertilizers can run off of fields into waterways. And if it isn't doing that, or even if it is, it also can be dumped in places where it contaminates the soil health and the groundwater. And from a social environmental justice standpoint, which is a big, huge word for just caring about other people, sometimes this waste can be dumped in communities that are kind of vulnerable and that don't have the power to speak up. So it's nasty from every single angle, and we shouldn't do it. So, number 1, buy organic. 2, stop buying stuff that is pumped with antibiotics. So buy antibiotic-free chickens and beef and pork and any other type of meat that you're buying. Okay, we're going to put a pin in that and pause for a second to thank our sponsors. I love reading, but I am just so busy that it's really hard to find time for reading. Especially because honestly, like when I do have time, I'm just reading my textbooks. So when I have a chance to sit down, even though I try and keep multitasking to a minimum, I really enjoy listening to audiobooks, especially if I'm working on a craft or taking a shower or driving somewhere. And listening to audiobooks has been a great way for me not only to engage in stories that I really enjoy, but also actually to learn. Audible has great books on meditation, guided meditations, and some really awesome books on sustainable living, like this book that I love called The Zero Waste Home by B. Johnson. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering you guys a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/stylish and sustainable and browse the awesome selection of audio programs. Download a title free and just start listening. It's that easy. Go to audible.com/stylish and sustainable to get started today. Okay guys, we're back, and I love you for listening to me and for tolerating my semi-rantiness in this episode, but I promise we're almost done. So first, buy organic. Second, buy antibiotic free. 3, stop buying processed foods. I'm just going to be super short and simple with this. Processed foods are nasty. I use that word a lot because I'm trying not to use bad words and it's challenging. So yes, preservatives, weird additives, just like corn syrup and colorants, which many of them are known to be carcinogens. It's just a bunch of bad, nasty, crappy-ish, and they're just so bad for you. Can I say that enough? They're bad for you, so it's just not even funny. Please, I'm begging you, stop buying them. Don't buy processed foods. They are bad for your body. You can watch, Super Size Me or do something like that. I'm not gonna rant at you about all the nasty stuff that's in processed foods. And thankfully, I feel like it's becoming more common knowledge that processed foods are really bad for our bodies. Besides other really big, scary things that some of the additives do, they can make us retain water, they can make us bloat, they can make us gain weight. It's a whole laundry list of really bad stuff. So processed foods are not good for your body, and I'm sure you already know that because you're listening and because you care about your body. And the second thing is that they are bad for the planet. Why? Because they have a ton of packaging, and the plastic stuff that they come in is horrible for the planet. Processed foods are literally the dirty worst, and they're all in the middle aisle of the grocery store. So when I say processed foods, what I mean is anything that isn't around the edge of the grocery store. So it's not in the produce section, not in the dairy in the back. I'm not really even talking about juice, which we can talk about later. It's essentially just things like the worst offenders are the pre-made, boxed, and frozen foods. Just no one should buy that stuff. That stuff is just straight up garbage. It really is. And like I said, the packaging that it comes in is designed to be used and thrown away. It can't be recycled most of the time. It definitely can't be composted. So it just goes straight to landfill. And that is just nasty. Landfills suck, and if it gets dropped somewhere along its way to the landfill, it can get into the ocean, and landfills leach microplastics into water supply. It's just a nasty, nasty thing. So don't buy processed foods. That is the third step to making the transition. For biking or walking places within 3 miles of where you live. And I know that is a lot more challenging, so I'm kind of trying to list these in order of the reality in which we can take them. So it can be really easy to buy organic, can be a lot harder to buy antibiotic free. That's a lot more expensive sometimes. And sometimes that's really, really hard, especially if you were not taught how to cook growing up, to get off of processed foods. And I think learning how to bike and walk places is an even bigger mindset shift, because you really have to stop being lazy. That's just the basis of it. And I totally will not sit here and say that I don't drive places. I definitely drive places. I also own a Prius, so I don't feel as bad as I used to when I had a 2010 Ford Focus. But yeah, I walk and bike to work every day, and it feels good for 2 reasons. First of all, because when you bike, you have a much smaller carbon footprint than when you drive. And Also, when you walk, you have an even smaller footprint than when you bike, because bikes are made of a lot of stuff that are carbon-based and a lot of fossil fuel-based materials. So walking is really the best, but sometimes that's not feasible because it can be really slow. Not only, though, is the carbon footprint a lot smaller, but it gets you outside and moving, and those two things, being outside and encouraging movement in your life, are, I think, the most essential parts of having a personally sustainable lifestyle, of having a healthy lifestyle. Those are so important. So biking, walking where you can, that is a wonderful lifestyle shift. And like I said, you can start just biking or walking to somewhere within 1 to 2 miles. That's like a 5-minute or 10-minute bike ride at the most. And then if you love it, then you can get more hardcore. And if you live, a half an hour from work, some people bike that. That's amazing. And so you just got to ease yourself into it, start where you're at, and just allow it to be something that you have fun with instead of beating yourself up about it. And then finally, in addition to all of these things, which, like I said, each one of them have an environmental and then a health-based reason to change. Final one is just like ditching the plastic bags at the grocery store, which has become very trendy, I think, in a lot of places, but is a serious thing. And this can be done really super, super easily. And maybe I should have put this at the beginning of my list because this might be the easiest transition. But again, it's a big mindset shift. So bringing a reusable bag into the store every time you come in, even for us veterans, air quotes still again, guys, I wish you could see me, can be challenging and hard to remember. So you either bring a brown bag or you use a brown bag, and hopefully the grocery stores near you allow you to have a choice. If they don't, then you just juggle it out the door, and I've done that way too many times. If you really need to have a good reason to stop using plastic bags, you can kind of look at it like the pesticides. Those bags are made of soft plastic for the most part, especially the ones that they give you to wrap around produce. And if your food is rubbed on them, then they can actually release microplastics onto your food. And nobody wants to eat microplastics. That's not a yummy additive. That's not even a good flavoring. Nobody wants that. So yeah, that's gross. And it is challenging if you need to keep produce together, which I see a lot of people struggling with. You can just use little brown bags, or you can buy some little organic cotton bags. So I see a lot of people that have a hard time transitioning off of the little plastic bags that we put our produce in. But honestly, for the most part, I just throw them in the cart because I look at it like you're going to wash them anyways. And most of the produce that you're buying, especially if you're not buying organic, it's been so many different places. It's been touched by so many hands already. You should really be rinsing your food. And so there's probably not much worse that it can get into just getting its way into your car from the shelf at the grocery store. But that's a personal decision. And like I said, it is also a wonderful opportunity to just help a small company. Like they sell some great ones at the Package Free shop online. Buy some organic cotton bags or just use the brown bags there and compost them at home. If you do occasionally get plastic bags, they always come with takeout and it's annoying as hell, start collecting them at home and then just recycle them at your local soft recyclable drop-off. Most grocery stores have them, and I can say that at least for Washington. I know when we lived in Minnesota, a lot of them did. Some places may not, but you can always Google it online or call your local waste management people and they can tell you where to drop those off. So that's how you get started. Wow. It can be overwhelming. I know that's a lot. But like I said, start where you're at. If you can only afford to buy 50% of your grocery items or 25% of your grocery items organic or antibiotic free, then just start there. Any step is a step, right? And that step leads to another step. Standing still is the worst thing. So as long as you get yourself moving, then that's a good reason to pat yourself on the back. But you got to continue to move. So always keep that in mind. Continuing to move forward is really important. But also recognizing that it's not so intimidating that you can't start. You can start wherever you're at, I promise you. Cooper and I, when we first moved to St. Paul, we were working super minimum wage jobs and we were going to college and just hardly doing rent. But we prioritized buying organic food and we prioritized buying antibiotic free. And we made this shift because it was important not only from an environmental standpoint. But like I said, for all of these things, it's important for our own health. And when we invest in our health now and we take care of our bodies now, less extreme things happen longer down the road. And I think that's something that's really powerful. And it's just like maintenance. Like, you maintain your car, you should maintain your body. You guys are amazing, and I know that you're so capable of these steps. So I'm going to run through them one more time, and then feel free to reach out to me if you need any extra tips on the Instagram account. First of all, buy organic. Secondly, buy antibiotic-free meats. Thirdly, buy non-packaged foods, or don't buy packaged foods. Packaged foods blow. Just remember that. That's your mantra. Packaged foods blow. Bike or walk everywhere you can is the fourth step to making this transition. And then just stop getting single-use plastic bags. So that's also a very simple step that I know y'all are so capable of. I absolutely adore you guys, and I'm so proud of you guys. I've been hearing about the changes that you guys are making and different thoughts that you have and questions. Please continue to send those to me. It's so inspiring seeing what you guys are doing, and some of the things are steps even so far above what I've been able to do yet. We are just all on this journey together, and even though we're all at different points, there's so much room for all of us to grow. And also, side note, none of us are perfect. I will definitely say, for a long time, I had the hardest time giving up Annie's goldfish, which are pretty good for you, sort of, processed foods. But it was so hard for me. It was so hard for me to give that up. So we all make mistakes, but moving in that direction, moving towards organic, towards antibiotic-free, towards package-free, towards biking and walking, and away from the single-use plastics is where we want to go. You guys rock so much. I love and adore you forever and ever. If you haven't already, follow if you're listening on Spotify, and be sure to subscribe on the iTunes and shoot me a review. I want to hear what you think. So please leave a review of the podcast. I can't wait to hear what you guys are wanting more of in the future. Thanks again for taking time out of your day to listen to me. You guys are awesome. Sending good vibes and lots of good karma your way. I love you, and I will see you next week.